Well, hey guys, Eric Nevins here, and welcome to Halfway There. I just wanted to hop on here before the show gets started today and say Merry Christmas. This episode comes out on Christmas Day. Normally on a Monday holiday, I just go ahead and take the week off and give you, just a short episode or something like that. But today, because this story is so much about the gift of grace that God has given us, I thought it was just appropriate to share it on Christmas. And I hope that you'll enjoy it. I hope that you get a chance to listen to it today or later in the week. Share it with some friends or family, and just be amazed at what God does and how much He loves you and me, and how much He wants us to be free from all those things that entangle us. I think you're going to get that impression today, and it's just a really great story. So I wanted to say thank you so much for listening to this show, for downloading it and sharing it. It means a lot to me, and it's been a real labor of love. And so many of you have done that this year. And so this episode is kind of my gift to you, and I hope that you enjoy it, and I hope that you share it. Thanks a lot. Merry Christmas. Welcome to Halfway There. I'm Eric Nevins, and this is the show where we have honest conversations with ordinary Christians about today's Christian experience. Today's episode is going to be a special one. I'm excited to talk with my guest because I've heard her story in church, and just a little bit more that she shared with me, and it's powerful what God's done in her life. She's excited to talk about, and when I asked her what are we promoting, she said just the redeeming power of Christ. I can't wait to hear more about that. This is going to be a powerful story, guys. With me today is Ronda Nelson. Hi, Ronda.
Hi.
I'm so glad that you're on Halfway There. Welcome.
Thank you.
Let's go ahead and why don't you just tell us a little bit about who you are and where God has you now, and then we'll go back and we'll hear your story.
Okay. I'm Ronda Nelson. I'm 50 years old. I have 4 children. One that is already home with Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a 30-year-old with three grandchildren. And at home, I have a 13-year-old son and an 8-year-old son. And I'm a single mom. And that's about my life. I just work and take care of kids. I'm as ordinary of a Christian as you will find.
That's perfect. I love that. What do you do? I don't even know what you do for work.
I'm in senior home care.
Okay, great. I just was curious. I didn't know. Yeah, thanks for that. Definitely. You're also a great singer. You sing on our worship team, and I've heard you sing many times there. How'd you get into singing?
I was always musical. I took piano lessons as a child, and music, goes far back in my DNA. And always just loved that. But when I was 13 years old, my mom took me to see a Broadway performance of Annie, and I was just blown out of the water. And from that point, I just started to sing. And I don't know where it came from, but it developed through my high school years, and it just kind of became my identity of who I was through high school. Just always being, involved in the music really heavily.
Yeah. You ended up being in a band, is that right?
I did. After I graduated from high school, I didn't know. My mom was living out of state. I was living with my dad. My dad wasn't really around much. I was kind of on my own, and I didn't really know how to apply to college or how you do that kind of stuff. So I just kind of decided I wanted to join a rock band, and I abandoned my opera lessons I had for the last 4 years and went and sang some rock and roll.
That's fantastic. That's cool. Okay, so how did you? I know we're going to get into some of your later experiences of when you had some powerful experiences with Christ, but how did you originally find Christ?
I was raised by a Christian mom. She was a single mom. My mom was divorced when I was 6, and she raised me, but we went to Lutheran church every Sunday, never missed, and my mom sacrificed greatly to put my brother and I into Christian schools, so we went to Lutheran schools all the way through. And so I always knew the story. I always knew about God. I always believed. But it was not until I had my first child and I was holding her that you realize, I realized, the kind of love that God has for me.
What was that feeling like? Can you describe that?
It was overwhelming. I just sat and bawled. I was in the rocking chair holding her.
Yeah.
and the gratitude that I felt was just immense, for the first time, just to really understand, the depth of love, that I have for my child is it's just beyond
Yeah.
anything I'd ever known, and to think that God has that for me.
Yeah. I remember thinking with every one of our kids, but especially the first one, you're just kind of overwhelmed with this little thing, right? And
Right.
how adorable and how much you love them. They can't do anything for you. You just are going to do everything for them. And yeah, that's a powerful moment. You kind of had that moment. What did you do? Like, as far as some of your early discipleship, or who were some of your influences and people that kind of taught you about God and the Lord?
Yeah. Well, what happened was, I was in that rock band, and the bass player and I kind of got a relationship going, and we had that child before we were married. And through the process of having her and then deciding she needed to be baptized, back in the Lutherans, we did the infant baptism.
Uh-huh.
And so we started going to church, and there was a really dynamic pastor there that, preached these great sermons that I'd never heard anything like that coming from the background I came from. And we just started getting involved and started, joining some Bible studies and just some great people around us, with friendships. And we just started growing in the Lord,
Mm-hmm. You ended up in worship music, is that right?
Right. When we had the child, my husband still remained in the rock band. I bowed out and just became mom while he worked and went through school, and we lived with parents for a while, while we got him through school and did that whole thing. And in that same time, we started volunteering at church on worship team. It was a small church and they needed musicians, and so we thought we could help, and that's how we got involved in it. And after a few years, the worship leader director at that church, they were going to move on. And my husband, Todd, was asked to step into that role. And so he did that part-time, and it became something that we did for a long time. And the church eventually folded. And we moved on from there to a couple other situations. But ultimately, we landed at this church in Highlands Ranch, and after volunteering on the worship team there for a while, he was asked to take that position full time.
What was that experience like?
It just felt like that was like what we were cut out to do. What we ultimately, it's where our relationships, from the beginning in the band and then growing through the church, and it just felt like a really good fit. We did it together. We did it every week. We were doing 4 services a week, Saturday night and 3 on Sunday. There was practices involved. I was on the team that helped plan the services and come up with creative ideas, to get the message across. And it was just our life. We just lived that. And we both enjoyed it a lot, I think. And
Yeah.
we just...
So it sounds like you found your niche. You were where you belonged.
Exactly.
Did you say that? Okay. Cool. So I want to ask you, so I always ask this question about a wall experience when God felt far away or distant. And I know that you have a pretty significant experience.
Yep.
And so we're going to talk about that. I want to know, before we go into that, is there anything else that we need to know to kind of set the stage for that experience?
I don't think there was anything that set the stage for that experience. It hit me. It just came out of the blue. It just was unexpected and came out of the blue.
All right. Yeah. So okay, you're at this. So why don't you go ahead and just share that story with us, and then we'll
Okay.
take it from there.
So we're in this time where we're really involved in church. We're, working hard at it and enjoying it, enjoying our friends there, enjoying being in Bible studies, and just thriving at this church, just really feeling in a good place. And when I look back on this, I wonder sometimes how this happened. And I understand now that you break faith somewhere,
Mm.
it doesn't just happen. And when I think back on how I broke faith, I think that sometimes being in a position like that, when you're in a very public light, um, you're getting a lot of kudos and compliments on, what you're doing. You just start to feel, I think your ego just gets a little big, and I think that's what probably happened with me, coupled with just the time in my life, midlife crisis. I don't know. I was 40 years old when this happened.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Okay. So you said when this happened, go ahead and take us into like what happened.
okay. So this is in 2007. We're motoring along there just great. Happy, happy marriage, happy family, happy church, happy everything was going good. And on October 5th of 2007, there's a message on my phone when I got home, back when we had message machines.
Right.
And I pushed that, and it was an old boyfriend from high school. His name is Brian, and I had dated him from the time I was 15 to 19. So I'd spent a lot of time there, and it was some very sweet memories. At the time, we broke up because he was beginning to experiment with drugs and things that it just wasn't the path I wanted to go.
Even
So
though wait,
anyway, that ended, but
sorry, even though you were in a rock band, you didn't want to experiment with drugs?
No, I experimented with the alcohol,
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
but I never got into the drugs,
Gotcha.
thankfully. But anyway, I got this message on the phone, and it was him, and he just said, "Hey, I'm looking for a classmate I'm wondering if you could give me a call and help me." And so I thought, oh, well, maybe I know, I don't know. So I gave him a call back, and I said, "Oh, well, who is it that you're looking for?" And he said, "Well, you." And I said, "Oh." He told me that there hadn't been a day gone by in the last 25 years that he hadn't thought of me, and this is at the place where I was. Like I said, I think I wasn't as close with God as I should be. I was a little bit just, like I'd said, I think your ego gets big, and I'm also in this place where my home life was. I had a small child and I had grown children, so I'd been doing this a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I was feeling a little bit like, does it ever change, or desiring some kind of change. And so anyway, I told him that I was happily married. I had 3 kids, and that, I'm very involved in church and all of that. And he said, "Oh, that's really rare. Not many people make it that long. We've been married 19 years." And I hung up with him. That was that. But at the end of the conversation, he told me, "If anything ever changes, please call me, and I will be here for you." And I was just like, wow. As I thought about this over the next few days, I thought, wow, that's really, this is where Satan gets in, and he starts to
Mm-hmm.
whisper to you, and you don't realize it. You just start to feel these things, and I wasn't strong enough in my faith to recognize what was happening or to battle it. And so I called him back in 3 days, and I wanted to hear more of why I was so wonderful that he had thought of me every day for the last 25 years. That was good for my ego. I thought, wow, who is special enough to someone for them to think about you that long? And so I called back and started a phone relationship over the next few weeks. And
Yeah.
eventually,
Rhonda,
oh, go ahead.
well, before you go on, I want to ask you a question before we get too far away from it. You said you felt like your faith maybe wasn't what it needed to be.
Right.
And I'm curious about that because I think there's something here. But can you just describe like how would you describe it now where you were? I mean, I know you said you were kind of
I think I was relying more on myself and my powers and my
Mhm.
abilities, and I was not just fully trusting and relying on God. I knew God. I knew God loved me. I loved God, but um, I just wasn't making that faith choice every day,
Yeah.
you know,
W-
and really,
Well, the thing that stands out to me is you guys were involved in church. Like you were
yep,
heavily involved. You were there, and there's a way that sometimes that can get mistaken for spiritual maturity. Do,
exactly,
doing things all the time,
exactly.
being there every time the doors are open or at every event or whatever it is. And I was curious about if you felt like maybe that's what happened. Sounds like maybe you did.
I think that's exactly what happened. Yeah,
Yeah. It's easy to assume, hey, I'm there. I'm working. So
right,
yeah. Okay. That's what I kind of wanted to know about. Like if that was the experience that you had had. Okay, so you
exactly.
called your
I think
old
you
boyfriend.
pinpointed it there.
That's awesome. So you called your boyfriend back. You started talking to him, and
Uh
then
huh.
your old boyfriend, and
Yep.
then what happened?
And just started texting and talking, and just started a relationship back up. And um, it was never my intention to leave my marriage. It was. I would just think I was getting, the strokes that I wanted right there. I was getting attention. It was making me feel, the way I felt, back in high school when it was new. And again, the maturity thing.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I just kind of continued with that for about the next month
Okay.
until I finally went and met with him face to face.
The relationship kept
Yeah,
escalating because it felt good.
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Obviously, this is not good.
No.
How are you feeling at this point?
I'm feeling like a hypocrite at church. I'm singing. We're on praise team, and I'm standing next to other people, praising God, and I'm not thinking about God at all. I,
Hmm.
I'm I'm thinking about Him, thinking about how I don't belong here right now. I this is I felt like a complete hypocrite.
Like, how did that resolve? What happened there?
Okay, well, at the same time that this was going on, I'd started a friendship with a gal on the worship team. She was a single mom, and she got out and did things more often than I did. And she invited me out one night, and I hadn't been out. I'd been home every night with my family for as long as I could remember. But she invited me out, and my husband encouraged me to go. Thought it'd be good for me, so I went, and we went to a bar and sang some karaoke, which I'd never done before, which I thought was kind of fun. And um, I had alcohol that night, which I hadn't had alcohol in years and years, and it my tongue was loosened. And she looked at me and asked me point blank if my husband was the love of my life, and I just answered no. And it was such a quick response that she's like, "Oh, really? Well, tell me what's going on." And I spilled the story to her. So um, and then it kind of came up that she was in a relationship too, and it with the love of her life. And she said, "Do you know who it is?" And at that moment, I hadn't really known it before, but pieces that I'd seen before kind of clicked in my mind, and I realized that I said, "Is it my husband's partner?" My husband had a partner in the ministry that did the drama and the video, and they were partners. And I knew that he was having trouble in his relationship with his wife, and I asked if it was him, and she said it was. So here we were, two people in the church, both having affairs. Well, she was single, he was having the affair, but they were having an affair, and um, and here we had the goods on each other now, and it um, another gal was with us that night who was also on the worship team, and she also spilled. It was a perfect storm. It was like um, Satan had been busy
Wow.
in our worship team, and it all spilled, and it came out, and we all were in the same situation, so we were feeling the same kind of emotions, like, like, this is, don't, it kind of came out like, don't you deserve to be happy? And you know so what happened was, we all knew this about each other. This went on for probably about 6 weeks, since the time we found this out. And we would go out all together to a bar or whatever, just to kind of give us an out or an escape, an excuse of who we're with. I'm going out with the girls and all that. And it wasn't really questioned, and then, and then we would go our separate ways. It wasn't like we hung out all night or whatever, but it just, when I look back on it, I cannot believe that this happened.
Yeah.
Because, the way Satan works, it just makes it seem normal. Like,
Oh, that's
I mean, I knew I was sinning, but it just doesn't feel as bad when you're in it as it is.
Yeah.
And the fact that 3 of us on the same team, I mean, my gosh.
Yeah, well,
how egregious does it get?
It just occurs to me, how important community is, right? So,
right.
If you had someone in your community say, "Hey, Rhonda, hello, this is not good," and
exactly,
what are you going to do to change this or to fix, to just how you
right? It could have had a very different outcome.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So what happened after that was, on December 19th, 2007, my husband's partner just couldn't take the pressure and the guilt of it anymore, and he confessed the whole thing before the elders. And it was all blown apart, and I had just come out of a music rehearsal for the Christmas, the Christmas, service. And I went home, and my husband and I were 10 o'clock at night sitting on the couch, getting ready to watch the news, and his phone rang, and it was the pastor of the church, and I could hear him. And he said, "Would you please hand the phone to Rhonda?" And I took the phone like, what on earth could this be? And he said, "We just had a conversation with Hans, and I'm parked in front of your house, and you need to come out, and we need to talk." And that was the last thing I was going to do.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to do that. It felt very controlling to me at that time with what I was doing. It felt, I just felt like, well, who are you to tell me that I need to come talk to you? And so I said, I need to talk to my husband. And I had to spill this very quickly, because within minutes, the pastor was knocking on our door, not giving me any time at all to explain any of this to him. I just had to throw it in his face, and I pretty much ran. I told the pastor he needed to leave. He wouldn't leave. I said, "Leave or I'll call the police. Leave or I'll call the police." And I just kept saying that till he left, and he went down the street, and then I took off and went and joined my boyfriend that night. And I didn't get any sleep that night. And I came back in the morning to talk to my husband, and the next night, they felt like they needed to let the whole worship arts ministry know what had happened. And so they all received an email. It was a large team of people. It was a lot of people. And they all received this email that spelled out that I was in darkness and what I had done and what's been going on. And it was just so completely humiliating.
Yeah.
And the shame and the guilt that I felt was just, I'm like, how did I let it get to this? Why did I not nip this in the bud?
Yeah. I hear in you were already feeling ashamed. and
Mhm.
then you had this confrontation, and that heaped on more shame, and then there was the larger community shame
Right.
kind
And
of heaped on
then
top.
the following Sunday, there was a letter that was passed out at church to the entire, everyone that was in every service. My mom received one.
Wow.
and
Did she know?
and not until after.
Oh, wow.
No, it was a surprise to her as well. But she went and spoke to the elders on my behalf. She felt like the publicity of it was a little much.
Yeah.
And I certainly did too at the time. I don't know how I feel about that at this point. I understand it better now, because it was just so egregious. It just really was. The betrayal and the um, collusion
Well, right, and I can see from
that went on,
your perspective, these are people you trusted and were friends, and
and who trusted me.
right.
Yeah. So, but yeah, after the letter came out, I just felt like I could not. I couldn't face it. I couldn't go back there. How could I repair my marriage and walk back into that church with everyone here knowing,
Yeah.
how could I do that? And I did, I chose the easy way out and I ran.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. I would do that too, I think. Where did your running take you?
I felt like, okay, so this is where I am. I made my bed and I got to lie in it. So I got to go to the relationship with this boyfriend. And I just thought maybe we could just plug him in, where my husband had been, and things could just move along just as they were. But he was not the same person that I knew in high school. And I entered into a brutally difficult relationship.
Mm.
It was just, he is not a Christian. He's a pretty narcissistic fellow. And he had a hidden drug problem that I didn't catch on for a long time.
Yeah. So he was still wrestling with that.
Yes. And I didn't realize that. And it's funny how, as my eyes started to get opened more as to who he was and what he was doing, how I would excuse it, like I'm here now, so I guess I just have to accept this now. At first I thought he was just going to be the perfect, it was going to just be peaches and cream the whole way. But a few months in, I found out, he has a daughter that he didn't tell me about. Because he had another marriage that he didn't tell me about. And, we were supposed to be getting married, but, I find out a little ways down the line that, he didn't get a divorce from his last
Oh, wow.
wife. They're still married after 12 years. I haven't seen each other. and I started excusing Meg. I guess that's just how it is out here away from church and in the world. And, he's got a porn problem. I guess that's what they do. He says that there's no man out there that doesn't. And I'm like, I guess I knew that my husband hadn't, but, but you just start to fall into this and just start feeling like you need to accept all these things because this is where you are now.
Yeah, justifying all that sin was easy after going that direction.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And he had a really good way of making me feel like everything was my fault. He didn't work. He didn't hold down a job. I was working at one point 80 hours a week and he would not work at all, and I'm trying to save the house, save the family, I'm working, and I don't see everything that's going on because he's the one that's home, and I just wasn't seeing everything that was going on.
Yeah.
But
tell us like the state of your heart, like how that's going, and then how'd you get out of that?
Well, I think after living with this for so long, I'd taken equity out of my home to invest in lawn equipment because he wanted to have a lawn business. I thought, oh, good, we'll finally get him working and all that. And, that was a disaster. He would say he went to do things and I'd go to bill them, and then they'd say he wasn't here, or, that kind of thing. It was just a disaster the whole way. And then, one day I came home from work and, realized that the lawn equipment wasn't there. And I don't know how long I was that I didn't notice it, but he had sold it. And, I had taken out loans on my home to pay for this stuff. And he felt like it was his to sell. And so I ended up in a lot of debt. I had owned my home outright because when this all happened, my incredibly sweet and generous mother didn't want me to be burdened at that time. And we were renting the house from her, and she signed the house over to me and gave me the house. So I owned this house.
Wow. Rhonda, I'm sorry, I can't let that go by. Like, that is just such an amazing.
Yeah, it was an incredible gift at a really terrible time when everyone else was, really judging me. It felt like,
right.
My mom came out with this gift, like, I want you to have a home, and I don't want you to worry about that. So she gave me the home. She did. And over the next period of a few years, I started creating some debt, because when you live with a drug addict, this is what happens.
Yep.
And over the course of the next 8 years, I incurred $190,000 loan on my house. And, that sounds like an awful lot of money. There was probably $50,000 in lawn equipment. There was cash taken out to take care of some of the house's problems, like a roof and those kind of things. But
sure.
So I've got this loan on the house. I didn't tell my mom because I was too embarrassed that here she gave me this beautiful gift, and all I did was borrow on it. So she didn't know about that. So I'm keeping that a secret. I'm keeping that in. I'm working, and to pay for the mortgage. And I think my mom probably thought, I don't know what she thought, like why I had to work so much. I don't think but she could do the math that I'm working more than what I should need to work. And so it was all kind of a mystery, I think, for her. And the relationship is going south. There's just so much that went into that, and his family and everything. So I started feeling, it just started boiling. Like, I just don't know that I can live this, And my son, Joe, at the time was in 6th grade, and he had been attending a youth group, and the youth leader was moving away. So he kind of wanted to go try the youth group at South Fellowship.
Mm-hmm.
And so we all decided to go to church, my mom and I and the boys, and let him go visit the youth group. And we went to church for the first time that day. I had been to other churches, for like a Christmas Eve service or, a few things like that, but I had not attended church regularly at all this whole time. And it had been a period of about 8 years at this point.
When was that?
That was October of 2015, 2 years ago.
Okay.
A little over 2 years
ago. So that's like, so you said that's like 8 years after everything else went down.
Right.
Well, I'm so curious. What did you find at South? Because so obviously we both go to this church, and that's how we met. But what was that experience like? I'm just curious.
I just walked in. I was really afraid of being recognized still. It's just a fear I had. I didn't want to run into people in grocery stores, and especially in church. And I sat down, and somebody that had gone to Mountain View sits right next to me.
Oh, wow. God was not going to let you hide.
She smiled at me, and she looked very welcoming. And I knew her. I didn't know she knew. I don't know if she remembered me or not, but I just smiled back, and it left it at that. But the music began that day, and I remember, I don't remember what songs they were or anything at that point, but it was the first time I'd really sat in worship in all those years, and I just bawled. I just
Wow.
bawled. You know,
Yeah. What was it?
it,
What was it that really hit you?
it's hard to define, but I think that I think I knew that I was coming back,
Hmm.
and I think I could. I felt like I was turning around, like I'm not running this way, but I'm turning and looking this way.
Yeah.
And I think I could feel the pull. I could feel, the pull of the Holy Spirit. And I didn't feel like it was a place that was going to judge me.
Hmm.
And I don't know if I would have felt that earlier or if it was just a place where I had finally come in my own life. But it set me on a new path. I attended we started coming, I worked at that time every other Sunday, so I came every other Sunday that I could, because I worked with a sweet lady every other weekend. And Ryan's sermons were so on point.
Yeah.
And I felt like he had, had written them just directly to me.
Wow.
And I just felt it's hard to explain. It wasn't like an immediate, I'm back. It just was a pull. I felt totally pulled. And my home life and everything was going so badly. So that was in October. And then, by February, I, it's kind of a funny story. I was sitting on my couch late at night, 11 o'clock, kind of lamenting my situation. And an email came out from South, and it was just kind of a general, what's going on type deal. And I thought, maybe I just need to reach out. And so I emailed back that email, and I thought, it's just a church email. It's going to go to the church office. Maybe the secretary will find it or something tomorrow. And it's 11 at night. And I just said, is there a private email that I can reach someone privately? And it was within minutes that Pastor Ryan emailed me back.
Wow.
And said, this is a private email. This is Pastor Ryan. What's going on? And that kind of blew me away that he's going to answer at 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And I just kind of spilled that I have no idea. I'm stuck. And I don't know how to get out. And he said, well, the first thing he said was, he spelled out the grace of the grace. He offered grace to me before he even knew what I had done or who I was. And he said, let's get together and talk. And so we did. We set up a meeting, and I had never spilled this story to anybody, in the church or really anyone. And so
Yeah.
I went to meet with him, and I think it was the next week. And I just remember just feeling such dread walking down the hall to his office. Like I almost turned and ran, but he's got a really good way about him that puts you at ease. And I sat in his office for the next hour and spilled this whole story. And I mean, I can imagine what he must have thought, being a pastor and
Yeah.
to have this, happen on your staff must.
Yeah. I didn't know that part of the story. Yeah. Okay. So he shared grace with you. So one of the observations
Immediately.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. That's one of the reasons. I don't know if Ryan listens, but that's one of the reasons I love Ryan.
Yeah.
But I love it about God too, right? Because
Absolutely.
I just heard in you. You said something really awesome when you said Um, this was the first time that I turned around. I stopped running and I turned around,
Yeah.
and I kind of looked at God again. And here's the reality: the Holy Spirit was calling you that entire time. And
Right.
I'm sure if we wanted to take the time to go into it, you could point to moments during that 8 years where you knew God was calling you, and you said you've been to church a few times, or
You know,
whatever.
it's funny because the whole time I knew God. I knew God loved me. I knew God wanted me back. I knew He wanted me in safety with Him, and
Hmm.
it was me. It was me. I was feeling too shamed. I was feeling too guilty. I couldn't go back. The whole time in all those 8 years, I would pray when I could pray for somebody else. You know, my two daughters were in the Joplin tornado and buried, for hours in that. And I prayed for them. And I would pray for Brian, please help this relationship. Don't you want to bring beauty from ashes? Don't you want to heal this and make bring him to you? Don't you, I would pray on behalf of other people. I would never ask for anything to myself because I didn't feel like I deserved it.
Yeah. Wow. So
So
tell me about, and I hear you. I hear your tears there.
yeah,
eh,
it's just that it was just I realized coming back to the church and feeling grace and being accepted, and I realized that the only pointing finger was my own, through the careful taunts of an enemy.
yeah. So first of all, I just love, obviously, I don't love what you went through, and that's
Or what
sounds,
I did, or
yeah. I mean, it sounds very painful,
yeah,
and on multiple fronts. But man, your story is such a tremendous example of the grace of God that
yeah,
we can never go so far. We can never go too far. That He still loves us and
right.
wants us back. And so thank you for your testimony in that. How so was it that meeting with Ryan when you really just came to terms with that and kind of
I
accepted it
think
for yourself?
Ryan listened to all this, and I think he was kind of just like, "Wow, I can't fix this.
Uh huh.
This isn't going to get fixed today." But he gave me one thing that I could do, and he said, "I think what you need to do is tell your mom about the house. Tell your mom. Quit lying to your mom and tell your mom."
Mm,
And I thought, "Ouch, I don't want to do that." And I walked out of there thinking, "I don't know if I can do that." But within the next hour, it was already becoming a burning desire to get that off of my chest.
yeah.
Um, and so I was able to follow through and do that. And I was so worried about what my mom would say. And I received such huge grace from my mom. She just was like, "Oh, thank God. I thought you were on drugs or something." She was, "That all it is."
Wow.
All this I had kept, from her out of fear of her thinking that I didn't treat her gift as I should have, and she just complete forgiveness right away.
Oh, wow. Sometimes the burdens that we carry are needless.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. How true.
Oh,
So,
that's amazing.
at that point, that was in February, and then at that point, when I would go to church, I started to feel the need to sing again. I had not sung um, for years, and all these years I hadn't sung. Maybe a little bit of karaoke, you know, once or twice a year, but I had not sung. I had not sung to God. I had not released, my emotions that I felt to God. And so I was afraid of singing loud, with people in front of me. I didn't want to be a distraction. So what I began to do was to move to the front of the church. I began sitting in the second row, actually, not the front row, because it was well planned, because it gave me a chair to hold on to because I sometimes get dizzy when I close my eyes. So I had the chair in front of me, and I could sing into speakers and noise and just all that noise coming off the stage, and I didn't have to be heard by anyone but God. I just wanted to sing to God. And I did that for months.
Wow.
And and that just it was very cathartic, just coming back and just and it took until the end of June, and I finally ended that relationship. And I found out in the process of ending that relationship about the drug problem. He had pretty much lived in the garage. He had the only key. He had changed the locks. And so when he went away, I broke into my garage and I found, crack pipes and
Oh, wow.
things that I wasn't even sure what they were. And I found out that all that had been going on. And I also found out through a neighbor that there was a woman that had been coming over to my house when I would work overnights, and that there was an affair going on there. So I was on the other end this time and got to feel what that felt like. But through it all, I just started feeling relief, to be getting out of that situation. And what happened with, I was worried about the drugs. I was worried about my son. Did he have to go visit him at that house where they'd be doing drugs? And what happened was he just walked away. I prayed to God, please don't let my son be in this environment. And his dad just walked away. And I did not hear from him for 5 months. So that gave me a good amount of time to just to heal and to start building my life again with my boys, and setting my house back to rights, and just praising God for getting me out of that. And
Wow.
I just started feeling really whole. I started losing a bunch of weight. I'd lost 50 pounds through that whole process. It
That's
was
awesome.
just, I was just feeling like I was back,
Yeah. I hear freedom like in all these different aspects of your life.
Exactly. Yeah. Just, it was so freeing. And I was, my son missed his dad, and I had to,
Sure.
there's hard parts to that as well.
Of
And
course.
we had to explain, drugs a little bit to him, and just, it's never easy. I'm always very aware that, it's my initial actions through all of this that created all of this. And so there's consequences, to bear,
Yeah.
for my lifetime from that action, but there's also incredible joys
Yeah.
that are coming
Yeah.
out of it.
Yeah. Of course. Of course.
And just, and being back with God and just feeling like the relief I feel, I don't think I will ever get in a relationship with God again that I just take for granted, that he's there, that he loves me, I love him, but it's a palpable, deep relationship, and I know that I've just scratched the surface, and I just want more.
Yeah. Well, I see that when you sing, because you sing in the worship team now, and I see it, and I just think nothing leads me into worship more than a singer or a musician who has just complete joy on their face as they're playing or singing or whatever they're doing. Right. And I see that in you all the time.
Yeah.
Every time you're up there, it often moves me to tears. But I don't let anybody see that though, just for the record. But I love that. Just knowing your story and how God has worked. And you answered my question before I even got to ask it. I was going to ask, what's it like now? And it sounds like you're in love with the Lord. You're intimate with him.
I am. But also my life, a year ago, last November, after I'd had this 5 months and I'd lost all this weight, and I'd been feeling strong and hear me roar, and, loving God. I hadn't sung yet. I still hadn't asked about being on the worship team. I didn't think that that was where I was going to go. I was just loving being back with God, you know, being free to live, just free to live, and just loving every minute of that. And then on November 2nd, a little over a year ago, I found out that my 22-year-old daughter passed away suddenly. And wow, you know, what a blow.
Yeah. Well, no doubt.
What an unexpected blow. You feel like you've just come out of this horrible thing and you're finally on the path where you need to be. And you know, this child that you grew in your body and your heart is just gone. And that, you know, you don't get to say goodbye.
Mm-hmm.
It's a year later now, and it's still the most incredibly painful thing. And this was a new test for my new relationship, my new, deeper, stronger relationship with God. It's a test every day. You know, I wondered, why did God let this happen now? You know, but then I think, what if He let it happen before?
Wow.
You know, because I don't know that I would have wanted to live had it happened before.
Yeah, and your faith may not have survived.
No,
Is that what you think?
I don't think so. No. So I'm just so grateful that God gave me that 5 months to just grow in Him and, you know, deepen my relationship with Him before this tragic loss.
Yeah. Now, I remember you telling me a story, I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that your daughter is the one who'd encouraged you to sing again.
Yeah, her name was Molly.
Yeah.
Molly Molly was just a really unique soul. She cared for other people so much. She was an encourager. And she was an artist. And Molly somehow recognized how I missed singing. And, you know, she would go to karaoke with me on occasion. I say that so much, it sounds like we did it all the time, but it was really like twice a year.
Right.
And we went to my brother's wedding the previous summer before she died, and she sang, and she blew us all away. We didn't know she could sing, and she came out and sang some Queen and We Will Rock You and all that. And
That's awesome.
She just stole the show, and it was awesome. But she nagged me constantly. Mom, are you singing again? Mom, you need to get singing. You know, Mom, why aren't you singing? It was a constant thing. And after she passed away, we found a will that Molly had written. And she had written it after she survived the Joplin tornado. She was 16 years old when she survived that.
Wow.
And I think she felt that life was fragile and she better write a will. So she wrote a will, and she willed, you know, her stuffed animals to her brothers and all that kind of stuff. But mainly what she just had something to say to the people in her life. And she just told me that, Mom, you need to sing again. She said, just try singing. And I did not think I would ever be in front, you know, in a worship team participating in that way again. I just always told her, no, Molly, that's past, you know. So when Molly passed away, I just felt like I needed to sing for Molly.
Yeah. And
so my oldest daughter, Kira, who has a beautiful voice, and she has a bachelor's of music and worship. We sang a duet together at my daughter's service, and I have no idea how we got through that, except by the grace of God.
Yeah.
but we sang a song from Molly's favorite musical. For her favorite musical is Wicked, and we sang "For Good," because I knew you. I have been changed for good,
Oh.
and we sang that. And after that, it was about maybe 2.5 months, and I felt like I was being nudged by God to just ask about um, singing occasionally on the worship team. And so I met with Ryan again, and Ryan, as always, is full of grace, and saw no reason that I I couldn't speak to Aaron about it being where I am now. And so I did, and I received grace from Aaron again after telling him my whole story. And I sang again for the first time on a worship team last February, and it has just been such a blessing to me to get back to doing that.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I think that you bring so much joy to it that it is just something really beautiful to behold, and I think it speaks so much to the work of God in your life. Obviously, you have some painful things to go through, and losing a child is very hard. And um, definitely, whenever I think of you, I pray for you in that.
Right.
Uh,
But God he lets you know that he's there. It's amazing.
what?
He's got these ways.
Well, share one of those ways with us. Like, what's a way that God has reminded you in the middle of all this?
Well, it's almost always through people. It's like, just for instance, last week, I went to the chili cook-off and worship night at church, and I'm sitting in my normal second row spot, and I had my son next to me, and we're worshiping, but at that moment, for some reason, I was just feeling incredibly alone. Like, I'm just so alone, and just missing my daughter a lot. And out of nowhere, here comes Nicole from the back of the church, and just comes up, puts her arm around me,
Yeah.
and just stands with me, and we worship together. And she gives me a hug and just said, "God told me that I needed to come and stand by you."
Wow. I love that she was listening. That's awesome. That's great.
I don't know.
Well, she must have been. So that's fantastic. Yeah, that's good. God does use people, and man, if we listen.
Yeah, my boss at work has relentlessly, pursued comforting me.
Wow.
She just brought me a meal on the anniversary of my daughter's passing. She remembered, and she wanted to bring a meal, and she checks in a lot. And, that I've definitely got issues to deal with the past year after, I had my 5 months of rock and roll. I gained all that weight back, just, taking comfort in places that I shouldn't, and I need to, I've got areas I've got to grow, and that, God's got to deal with me, and I know that, and I'm up for it. And, but one thing that, you realize when you lose a child, you realize that, survival is possible. You realize that the pain does not, it doesn't go away. It intensifies throughout the year. You start to miss them more the longer that you don't see them.
Mm.
But you realize that faith is a choice that you need to make every day. And you make that choice every day, and there is joy that comes. And I can't explain it, because there's this sadness to my life, and I don't know how long. I think I'll always feel it.
Yeah.
But I have joy. It's it's so hard to explain that you're going through the deepest, darkest, life changer you've ever experienced, but you still have the joy. I have the joy of, I will see her again. I will.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we see that kind of experience in the Psalms all over the place and in Lamentations and places like that where, hey, the world is not it's a broken place.
Yeah,
And we feel that, and death comes into our life, and pain and sorrow come into our life, whether of our own making or not. And there is grace, but we still feel and we still long. That's why I love Romans 8. There's that part in there about the creation longing for redemption, that we're longing for God to come and make everything right just as he promised.
yeah,
And I think that's not just I don't think you can understand it, I guess, until you've experienced some things, until you really have that deep heart pain even, and can take it to the Lord. So at least that's been
yeah,
my experience. It sounds like maybe it's been yours.
absolutely.
Is there anything you want to say to people who may be listening to your story that they could take away from what God's done in your life?
I don't know if there's anyone out there that did exactly what I did. I don't think so.
Sure.
But but I know that what I experienced with the shame and the guilt is a very common theme that people go through. And I spent 8 years wrestling with this and fearful, in judgment of myself, and afraid to go back, afraid to turn around. And all I can say is that it surprised me how easy it was to do.
Hmm.
When I finally did it. I was just kicking myself, like, why did I spend all these years?
Yeah. Yeah. I want to close out with this. Since I mentioned Romans 8, this is probably my favorite passage, and I think it speaks into this. We all know the verse, that we're more than conquerors. But there's this context here. What should we say then in response to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us? He did not spare his own son, but he gave him up for us all. And how will he not also, along with him, graciously give us all things? Now, this is the part I love that what you said sparked in me to make me want to look it up. Who will bring any charge against those whom God has chosen? And the structure in that verse is a question that demands an answer, and it demands a certain kind of answer. It's a rhetorical question. Some translations will put the answer in there. They'll say, no one. Right? Who will bring a charge against those who God has chosen? No one. It's God who justifies. Who is it then that condemns? No one. Jesus Christ, who died, more than that, who was raised to life, is at the right hand of God and is also interceding for us. And then there's the whole part about what shall separate us from the love of Christ.
Yeah.
But I love that.
If God is for us, who can be against us?
That's right. But who can condemn us? And the answer is no one, because God doesn't condemn us. And that means, our parents can't condemn us. Our church can't condemn us. We can't even condemn ourselves because God is for us. And Jesus has died for us to cover all of that and bring us to God. So anyway, Rhonda, thank you so much. I love that. I think you are a splendid and beautiful example of this very thing that we're talking about in Romans 8 and the grace of God. And you know what? I know that you have a long ways to go in terms of, walking through grief and finding God intimate in those times. And I'll be praying for you that you do. I know that you will, because that's who he is. That's what he wants for you.
Right. I know he will too.
But thank you for sharing your story. I'm just deeply touched by it.
You're sure welcome.